It's the Art of Action Figures, taking a look at Figma 649 A2 from NieR Automata version 1.1a. That's a lot of numbers. This is an android from the NieR Automata series. It's based on her design from the version 1.1a anime adaptation, which, can we get more anime adaptations of Square IPs? Because that seems to be the loophole for releasing their characters from Bring Art's jail. The latest character to break out is A2 from Figma, hot on the high heels of their stellar 2B, which I haven't reviewed, but popped up very high on my top 10 figures of 2025, and will feature throughout this video. NieR Automata has such clean, striking character designs that make for some very cool and unique action figures. And unlike 2B, who got versions from both BuzzMod and Figuarts, Figma is the only brand so far to take advantage of the anime license to make A2, making this the first update for the character since the Bring Arts, at least in 1/12 scale. And the less said about Bring Arts, the better. How did Figma do? Here's a quick tour around the box, which has some really nice figure photography printed all around it, and the obvious choice for NieR Automata with its iconic monochromatic designs, simple gray, black, and white color palette, which fortunately means that this not only matches nicely with Figma's 2B, but it also goes well with the Figuarts packaging. The box is much more compact than 2B's, since she doesn't have any accessory as large as the Virtuous Treaty Greatsword. Let's take her out and see what she does come with. Now, going over the accessories, they're a bit light for how expensive this figure is. Let's hope they make up for that in the design and execution of the figure itself. She has 3 faces and 2 different hairstyles that are compatible with all 3 faces for a total of 6 different looks. She comes wearing the neutral to sad looking expression and the full-length hair sculpt. She also has a shouting face and a gritting teeth face, as well as this short-length hair sculpt for after she cuts her hair. She has 4 complete pairs of hands, including fists by default, a pair of relaxed, open gesture hands, a pair of slightly less relaxed, open hands, and then a pair of weapon-holding hands. She has her 2 main weapons. This is the Type 40 sword, and then the big one, the Type 40 blade. And finally, standard for Figma, she comes with a display stand that has an arm. You can either port it directly into the back of the figure, where there's a small hole, or you can plug it into this angled peg piece and then use that to change the angle that it plugs into the figure. You also get a bag for the loose accessories that were just taped in this behind the tray. And the last piece, a spare wrist joint, which I like to keep sealed in this original bag just so I don't lose it. Here we have the main 3 playable characters from NieR Automata, Rei, Asuka, and Shinji. Joking, of course, it's the Figma 2B, Figma A2, and this is the SH Figuarts 9S, which fits in really well with the other 2, proving all of the toy companies right that they should never make a Shinji figure. I waited for 9S to be about 50% off the original price, and for that, he's not bad. He looks great. He fits in really well with all the other characters from Figuarts and Figma. To be honest, his articulation kind of stinks, so I'm glad I didn't pay the full price for him. Don't ask me how long it took to set this up. We have the Figuarts 2B on the left and the Figma 2B on the right. Figma 2B is the tallest for some reason, A2 in the middle, and then the Figuarts 2B is the smallest of the 3, but realistically, I think if you wanted to pair these 2, that would work out just fine. Similarly, if you have the Figuarts 9S, I think the scale would work out as well. Hey, what's so funny, you two? Sticking with gaming, on the left, we have the Yamaguchi Chun-Li, and on the right, Figuarts Chun-Li. And for some variety, one of the few Figmas that I own, it's Tracer from Overwatch, which just underscores Figma's history of making great video game figures. And then on the right, we have the first SH Figuarts Guts, the Berserker armor version, And we'll talk about his relevance to this video in a few moments. From the accessories, you can maybe guess. And finally, some SHF Dragon Ball. On the right, it's the Games Begin Super Saiyan Goku. And on the left, the Dragon Ball Super Android 18. Now, for articulation. The head is on the same type of ball hinge joint as 2B. It's also, coincidentally, the same as the Games Begin Goku. The ball is pegged into the hair at an angle. And so, I guess the idea is that gives you the ability to tilt the head side to side on the ball. However, it also makes it a little harder for the character to look up. Fortunately, she does also have a ball joint at the base of the neck, which can help a little bit with that. And they have put a hinge in the back of her hair that ultimately allows her to get pretty much equivalent range looking up with both the long and short hair. With all of that, she looks up about 30 degrees, down also around 30 degrees. The hair is a relatively soft plastic, but just be mindful of how it's flexing as you move the joints. Tilt side to side, 30 degrees as well. Swivels around. The neck isn't very big, and they've used this straight peg to attach it. It does make it a little easier to swap the hair, but could stand to have a little bit more neck range. The shoulders are ball hinges as well, and they're really nicely concealed. The top of her shoulder is sculpted asymmetrically, and you can see that there's more sculpt facing towards the front where you have this sort of like webbed design painted on, and then a little bit of a deeper cut at the back where it's more hidden by like the torso sculpt and just the fact that it's facing towards the back of the figure. She also does have a butterfly joint that just can pull out a little bit and go forward. The hinge lets her raise the arm way past 90 degrees, like 160 degrees. The ball joint lets it swivel around. It is at a little bit of an angle relative to her torso. Like the peg goes in kind of at an angle towards her back. So just be careful when swiveling the shoulder. Speaking of the butterfly joint, the range is maximized right above the chest. And when I say maximized, I mean really maximized. She can easily cross her elbows to the front, which is really good. However, it doesn't give you any range going back, and as I mentioned, the angle of her torso means she doesn't really get any inverse range, and hair gets in the way a little bit, but she can pretty much raise her arms straight up if you swivel them around. I think if you moved her head out of the way, yeah, you can bring it inside the vertical as well. This is a ball joint going into the torso, but it really doesn't move as a ball joint. It's mainly acting like a swivel. So she doesn't really get any ability to like shrug her shoulders up and down. I'm not really sure why they didn't do that. 2B definitely can do it quite a lot, actually. So yeah, I don't know if it's just because there's more room in this shoulder poof to let the ball joint be a little bit bigger, maybe. But yeah, A2 doesn't really get any amount of shrugging in the shoulders. There are bicep swivels perfectly hidden by these armbands of her outfit, and they go all the way around. Single jointed elbows that do protrude, as this style of Figma joint tends to do. It's really functional. She can bend her elbow way past 90 degrees. And then standard Figma wrist joint is just a swivel hinge swivel, so it can go in and out and up and down, and it gets a good amount of range, which is good for sword poses. Moving on to the torso, there's a single ball joint below the chest. It can pop out if you push it too far, as I just did. At the back, the cutout design kind of extends And I imagine the matte finish of her outfit is just going to get a little bit scuffed if you move it, especially if you rotate it. This is the only point in her torso where she can rotate, however, so that ball joint lets her tilt just a little bit side to side, maybe 10 to 20 degrees. Maybe 10, 20 degrees towards the front. Just gives you maybe 10 or 20 degrees tilt in any direction. Most of the forward and backward range comes from this lower joint. Her abdomen joint, I am not sure how I feel about this. When I first saw it, I had a really negative reaction, like, oh, get this Marvel Legends crap out of import lines, please. I can kind of see the vision. It maybe preserves the silhouette of her waist and avoids a lower cut that would go down here, which that kind of works for a design like 2B where she's wearing a skirt. But for a design like A2 where it's just a skin tight suit, not sure. At least the bottom is rounded, so it's not just an ugly rectangle front and center on the figure. I cannot stand when the Marvel Legends have the ugly rectangle front and center on the figure. There's not a straight line on the human body. Don't put a rectangle right on the front. The joint is fairly functional, I guess. It is, I think, just a single hinge. It doesn't rotate. Going forward on its own is about 30 degrees. Then add the top joint and easily 45, maybe a little bit more. And then going back, and then about 45 degrees going back as well. Because her top is black, the amount that this joint detracts from the appearance is limited. It's easier to hide cuts in a dark color than a light color because the shadows they create just kind of blend in with the outfit. As far as the shapes of the cuts, as soon as you bend her back, I think that's where it's most apparent. This edge is a little squared off, as are these. Bending her forward looks a little better from the front, but then from the back, there's this notch. Maybe it adds some range going back. In normal circumstances, though, especially if you've got it in shadow under her hair, there's a lot you can do to hide it, I guess. No swivel at the waist, which I'm a little surprised by. I think the Figuarts Evangelion figures have this same cut, but theirs is a ball joint. She seems to also have more of a Figuarts style hip design, which is interesting. It's pretty common for Figma to use just a ball peg, or maybe a drop down, or sometimes they have that 3-way ball peg joint for the hips. But these are more of a Figuarts style swivel hinge joint. Waist piece is fairly soft and floating, so it kind of moves and flexes out of the way. Occasionally it can kind of get stuck like that, which is a little frustrating. This bottom part of her costume is a flexible material, but it's very, very thin. Be pretty careful if you are bringing the leg up or towards the back. Just be mindful of how much you're flexing that material. But if you get that waist piece out of the way a little bit, you can pull it back, that lets her easily bring the leg up past 90 degrees going forward. And there's kind of a half butt sculpt on the waist, half of it on the leg situation going on. But again, because the waist piece is floating and fairly soft, you can bring the leg back easily, I don't know, maybe 70 degrees or so. So that's pretty good. No drop down switch. I kind of think is a positive. I think drop down hips make figures a little bit unstable and break the sculpt too much, in my opinion. I don't know if you've had Mafex figures. You might know what I'm talking about. If you like bring the leg way forward, you can just tell that the leg is like coming out below their hip, and it looks a little weird to me, and I'm not totally convinced by that design. What is a good design, however, is this hinge, which lets her kick all the way side to side, 180 degrees easily, maybe a little bit past. Very important for female figures especially. She does have some inverse hip joint range. Lets her kick her legs in, and that's useful for if you want to have her posed sitting with her legs crossed. You still have to fake it a little bit, like adjust the waist and rotate things a little bit. You can make it work well enough for a photo. It's not exact. You have to tilt her spine a little bit to compensate, but you can make it work, especially if you put something right under this butt cheek here. The other thing that inverse hip range allows you to do is have the figure standing with the feet together, or if the range is enough, like this, even with the legs crossed. And female characters especially are often posed this way. It kind of accentuates the hourglass shape, so that's really good that A2 is able to do it so well. Thigh swivels are there. They're also very well hidden, and they're fairly tight, but functional. Another rarity for Figma, they have given her double hinge knees, and they don't look terrible. I know people really like double hinge knees, but I have not been extremely impressed with Figma's implementation of them to date. I think they look way too much like knee pads on figures like the Tears of the Kingdom Link and the Dandadan Okarun. I know people were really praising those double hinge knees on those figures, but to me they just are squared off in front of the leg, and it makes them look like knee pads, and I can't unsee it. I guess people just really like the range, but these double knees, however, don't do that at all. They're very, very smoothly integrated. You can see they're rounded off and they go under the leg sculpt. They do not have a hard edge around the perimeter of the knee joint, which is what I'm talking about when I say it looks like a knee pad. And they get tons of range, so that's pretty great. Just to compare, 2B got the classic Figma single disc hinge, and that's the benefit that the double knee gives. It's maybe an additional, 20 or 30 degrees of knee bend. They could probably squeeze a little bit more out if they cut into the back of the thigh a little bit, which they did on 2B. I don't know why they didn't do that on A2. It kind of seems like these figures were designed by totally separate people that didn't talk to each other. 2B also has a ball joint in the upper leg, and that technically increases the amount that leg can bend. Like you can see, it brings her lower leg closer to the upper leg, right? And so if you combine the single hinge knee and that ball joint, you can see the range is actually almost the same between 2B and A2. Like look at the angle of the lower leg here. In fact, I think 2B might have a little bit more range than A2. I've seen a lot of people comment that single hinges are just like universally a step backwards. I think it just depends on the character, how their legs are designed, whether or not it's really going to benefit from having a double hinge or not. In this case, A2 doesn't really have a place to put this ball joint that 2B does. And with 2B, she has this very specific like thigh-high boot, and the single hinge is really good because it preserves the look from the front, whereas A2 has a very clear knee joint cut into her leg that's sort of worked into the design. Her design already has like some seams in it that kind of tricks your eye into ignoring the knee joint. 2B, however, if she had a big square knee joint, number one, it would not have this nice glossy finish, and number two, there would be much more noticeable seams. There's already a seam here where just the knee joint pinches in, but that's going to happen on any knee. What you don't get is this like boxy diamond sort of shape. We don't have to imagine what double jointed knees would look like on 2B. We've already seen the best case scenario thigh-high boots with double knees from InArt with their Anne Hathaway Catwoman figure, who wears basically the same style boot, has double knees, which in my opinion break the continuity of what is supposed to be a very smooth, continuous article of clothing too much. Your mileage may vary. Some people might not mind it and prefer having the ability to collapse the leg completely on itself. And so I'm willing to give designers a little bit of credit where credit is due, and don't just assume that like more joint good, less joint bad. Okay? Finally, at the bottom, she has these very high heels and standard swivel hinge swivel ankle joints. They go up quite a lot. Down just a little bit. And then if you swivel, almost a perfect ankle rocker, so you can pretty much get it anywhere in between there and flat, no problem. And since she's already wearing these high heels with a specific shape, her toes are already pre-bent, and she does not have or really need a toe hinge. Here's a close-up of the face. She has blue eyes, some pink eyeshadow, a small line for the mouth with pink around it for the lips, a small line for the mouth with pink lips surrounding it, and the little beauty mark on the chin, just like 2B. And if you're like me and you're curious if 2B is able to use A2's faces for additional unmasked expressions, the answer is no. Unfortunately, the connections just don't work either way. I have seen you can swap the head completely. Here you can see the connection is just much smaller for A2. Here you can see the shouting face. Nice detail on the open mouth. Lighter shade of pink for her tongue and a darker shade for the surrounding mouth. The gritting teeth face. I really like this expression, but also looking at it up close, it's a little weird that she doesn't have any upper lip, right? The lower lip is there, and then the corners of her mouth are a darker shade. The hair is molded in a light gray with a little bit of gray shading. The seams are pretty exposed, especially from the side. And at the back where this hinge joint is. She doesn't have the advantage of a headband like 2B, where you can put a straight line through the hair and it won't look odd. The short hair fares much better in this regard due to the looser strands of the hair sculpt. There's still a seam, but the surrounding strands do well to hide it, except for extreme close-up. The head is on a straight peg into the neck, so swapping the hair is really easy. It just pulls right out like that. Both sets of hair come with a peg to go into the neck. As I mentioned, the long hair does have a hinge, and the only thing I don't love about it is this is as relaxed as the hair can get. So it's always out at like a 45-degree angle or more. It holds itself up pretty well. There's a couple of dead spots like here, but if you push it all the way up, it does a little bit better for some reason. And quick look at the underside of the long hair. It doesn't appear to have shading, but the sculpt is sharp enough that it carries its own form shadows pretty well. Now, her body has a really interesting combination of like a very torn, tattered Yorha uniform, like similar to 2B's. Then she also has these like web lines or veins in black cut across the upper arms and her upper legs. The outfit has the same really nice satin black finish as 2B's, but Figuarts finish on 9S and 2B is a little bit glossier, so it's not a complete 100% match, but it's close enough for me. They use these armbands to hide a bicep swivel, which, good, that's exactly what you do with a design like this. Any parts on this figure that are a mixture of skin color and black are molded in the skin color with black paint applied over top, and that is a very, very good thing because painting this light skin tone over black is just never going to match in mass production. See countless examples of figures that have tried this and failed. The latest is maybe the Marvel Legends Psylocke, who has skin tone paint over her purple and is not a good match at all. The lines are pretty clean between the black parts and the skin tone, but there are a couple spots they missed just a little bit, like the left side of her chest here, compared to the right side, which is a little bit cleaner. It's not perfectly aligned under her arms where the torso pieces connect, and probably just the result of those being painted separately and then assembled. Fortunately, pretty hidden. I thought for a second her abdomen might have been molded in black and then just painted and then just given the same finish as the top, but it's actually also molded in the skin color because of the cutout at the back here, and the black is painted over that. But the line work on the cutout is pretty good. Little squiggle there, but not bad. Standard for Figma, she has a hole for the display stand. Nicely hidden by the long hair if you're using that one, but also easier to get away with on a black costume since the shadows kind of hide in the color. The bottom of her dress is a soft PVC overlay, molded in black, I'm assuming, and it's a pretty good match to the painted black of her upper body. And you can see it has this design sculpted in, which is great. The waist piece is also a soft PVC, which helps with giving her a little bit of extra leg range. It's also floating, meaning it's not really attached to anything. It's just kind of wedged between the abdomen and the hip joint. One downside of this being a floating piece, I find it like tends to fall down a little bit, like almost like her pants falling down, but it's just her entire butt, and you can see like the whole system in there, which is not ideal. You just kind of have to shove it back forward, which is kind of awkward. Benefit and trade-off of it being a floating piece is it can kind of move from side to side, which is good because it allows you to like adjust the angle of her hips and still preserve this line and this line. She doesn't have a ball joint at the waist, so she can't really tilt the spine like you would for this sort of pose. It all has to come at this like upper diaphragm joint, which is just a little bit too high to really appear natural like the way a person would. Their lower spine would bend more than the upper spine. And then similarly, for this situation where the waist goes back like this, it helps to kind of preserve the butt sculpt a little bit when you bring the legs forward, which is always a problem with figures that have articulated hips. 2B got around this by just sculpting the entire butt onto the leg itself, and she gets away with that because the skirt covers this most of the time, and you can really just see the bottom poking through. However, for A2, there's nothing to hide the top of the leg joint, so that's where this piece comes in, and you can kind of rotate it down, and it helps just keep this shape more continuous. It's not perfect. There have been better implementations, and there's definitely been worse, but the black is really cleanly painted at the top. It's probably some article of clothing because the wrinkles at the front where it kind of pinches in. And something a little bit unusual about A2's design, a lot of the design elements on her aren't clothing. She's supposed to be kind of dirty and torn up, and a lot of the design elements we see are where her like top layer of android skin is peeling off and cracking. So and she has this kind of like abstract blob cutout. And since A2 is kind of an android gone rogue, she's usually like covered in dirt, and there's a little bit of that here. It's hard to pick it up on camera, but you can see there's a little like hint of dark shading around these around her upper thighs. A little bit more on the back of the leg here and here. It's very subtle on camera, but in person it's more apparent. I'm finding it easier to pick up with the naked eye. If I turn the brightness way down, it's definitely more visible. So that's pretty cool. She has these two small pieces of her outer android skin remaining on the front and back of her left leg. And it might seem weird that it lays over top of the black part if you're thinking of the black part as clothing, but remember this is the underlayer of her android body, not clothing. So that's why these skin parts lay over top. They're not holes in clothing, they are little pieces of her outer skin that remain. And then technically, I guess these probably aren't boots, but they look and behave similarly to 2B's thigh-high boots. These are a little bit more forgiving of cuts, however, because they have these kind of like digital seam lines incorporated into the design. They look really good. They're two different colors. One is black, and then this one is like a dark chocolatey brown. The left boot has a little bit more of this seam line detail, and it looks really nice. The joints are also different colors to match the boots, which, very good. It would be weird if they didn't. And then the only other weird thing about these hinges is there's like a little almost gritty texture on the front. Her boots are maybe a little bit shinier than the body. They're not the same like matte satin finish, but they're maybe like a semi-gloss versus 2B's like hyper-gloss. And then these black high heels have kind of open toes that are nicely sculpted in there. And they have a consistent matte black finish with the rest of the outfit. And they look great. Phew! The smaller of the two weapons is the Type 40 sword. It has this intricate, mechanical looking sculpt, and then a relatively simple paint scheme, just two tones of silver, light silver for the blade, dark for the hilt. It does not come apart at the hilt. For her to hold this one, you just kind of have to wedge it between the open finger and thumb on one of the weapon holding hands. It's a little scary. You might want to heat the hands before you do this, but once you get it in there, it's very secure. She has no problem holding it, and it looks great. It only has space for one hand, so she's not really designed to use it with two hands. Although I guess you could use one of the maybe like open gesturing or grabbing hands to wrap around a part of it if you really wanted a two-handed pose, but it's designed to be a one-handed weapon. Then for the big one, we have the Type 40 blade. This one's a fairly thick slab of plastic, has a similar mechanical looking design, but then some more intricate paintwork, a little bit of dark silver in these little grooves, a little yellow on this panel, and then a different shade of light silver on the handle. Same on the other side. There's also some light silver on this pipe, and it has these cool holes punched through it, which is just kind of visually unique. This one does separate at the handle. It's towards the top, which is nice because then you can just easily thread this through the hand. This one she definitely can hold with both hands. There's room for that. And then once you have it in her hand, it's time to bring our friend Guts back for another installment of swords that are not designed for figures to hold without support, because this one is just way too heavy for the design of this figure to hold up in pretty much any way. Maybe you could do straight up and down like this. The shoulder is relatively strong, but it's going to have a strong tendency to just track towards the ground. So there's a reason the only promo photo featuring this sword has it resting across her lap and not raised over her head. And personally, I'm okay with that. I know there was a lot of heartache over Guts not being able to just throw this sword around willy-nilly. I don't really know why people expect that. Look at the damn thing. Yeah, these two are kindred in that way. Maybe not to such an extreme as Guts. This pose is probably doable. It takes advantage of resting the blade on the figure. It kind of works. Unlike Guts, who has all these like grooves for the sword to rest in, A2 just has her hair, which is smooth. So there's nothing really supporting it other than it's just pulling the wrist all the way back. That's not good because that's going to put strain on the wrist joint. I would definitely not display the figure like that. Is making me nervous with the wrist joint. I mean, just look at that. Look at that wrist joint. It is very small. And it is saying, do not make me hold that blade. And I think that's a smart way to behave with this figure. You can rest it across the other arm, rest it across her lap. Maybe you can have it like she's drawing it from her back. As long as it's touching the floor, that feels fairly safe. But yeah, it's definitely not a swing this around freely type of weapon. And even filming this section just to show how it's not held up is making me nervous, so we're going to stop doing that. She does come with a spare wrist joint, as I showed, but I'd rather not have to use it. She doesn't come with any way to store these on her back, which is one downside. 2B doesn't have that either. So you're going to have to get creative if you want to achieve that. And if you start to think outside the box of what a weapon is for, you can get creative and think of it more like a stand than a weapon, and that actually works really nicely. Overall, I think Figma has nailed it once again. Just like 2B, I don't have a ton of Figmas, but this is definitely one of the best that I've seen. They seem to almost always nail their video game figures, and I hope they keep doing that. I don't know if they'll continue this line. I'm not sure there are other characters at the same popularity level as 2B and A2. I'm even surprised that Figuarts made 9S. Like I said, that's a clearance pickup for me, and I'm pretty happy with it at that. But yeah, this figure is extremely well executed. It took 2 different companies, but it's really cool to have the main trio from the game. I think the only downsides of this figure are I'm a little bit surprised they didn't make the faces compatible with 2B. The price, it's expensive, and it doesn't come with a ton, but what is here is really detailed and well executed. The engineering is super solid, all the joints extremely smooth and stable. Yes, she can't swing the big sword around like a toothpick, which you're silly if you expect that. Maybe they could have included like a little prop just to hold up the sword. Maybe they could have thrown in like another virtuous contract, but I think she has a good set of accessories. I love that she has both hairstyles. Similar to 2B, she doesn't come with any like swappable torso parts, but I don't think she ever has that look in the anime. Correct me if I'm wrong. This has been the Art of Action Figures with the Figma A2. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.